Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Did you all enjoy the session with Hill Harper? He was outstanding. Let's give him a round of applause again. He was outstanding. We are delighted today to have, in my view, one of the most extraordinary businessmen, not in this country, but in the world, who, yes, you can give him a round of applause. And that's Kase Lawal. We got an opportunity to meet some 15 years ago. And as Derek outlined, back in 2002, his company became the largest African-American owned business in the country, and in 2006 was named our BE 100's Company of the Year, all much deserved. But as you and I were speaking yesterday, and I'd like you to share with the audience, you didn't just wake up one day and you had riches around you and you were just trying to figure out where you were going to move it around, what have you. You were Nigerian born, and I think it would be great to, if you would, is to share your story, your journey from Nigeria to ultimately the United States and Houston, and what gave you the desire. Because I know, in speaking with you and talking to some others, you had to convince your family, and your father in particular, to even give you the opportunity to come to the United States. But it would be great if you would share with with our audience a little bit about your journey, how you started, where you were born, and then ultimately what moved you here to come to the United States.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Butch, and the Grace family. You are a testament and embodiment of essentially what black business is all about in America. And we really do appreciate what your family have done and essentially carrying the light and the torch for what you all have created. Thank you very much. Please, a good round of applause for Black Enterprise. I honestly don't believe that my story is unique in any way, shape, or form. It is a story because so many before us actually have paid the ultimate sacrifice for us to be able to come here. Now, a lot of you may have seen the Eddie Murphy movie, Coming to America, or maybe it was way before your time, but that was really essentially something that I keep looking back on. And for me, I was the first generation in my family to come to the United States. And that was over 40 years ago. Now, I made this decision because I was influenced greatly because of the civil rights movement. And more specifically, growing up in the early 60s, when I read about, and we all saw the tragic incidents of the death of John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. I was very determined reading and knowing a little bit more about the struggles at that time and about the sacrifices that men and women were making during the civil rights era, that I really, really wanted to be part of the action. And I think even as I am now, I always want to get to be a part of the learning process or the experience. Because without that, I don't think we will have anything that we can share with the young generation. So as it goes, my father was adamantly opposed to any of his children going overseas because he felt the education in Nigeria at that time was very strong, very superior, and there's no need for you to leave. Suffice it to say that it took me a few years to convince him. But when I knew I wasn't getting anywhere, obviously I had to turn to my mom. And she was able to mobilize the ticket for me if I had an admission to come to America. And so was the story. And there we are. I don't think it's turned out too bad after all. Coming to America for me was very important. Naturally, if you leave Africa, you'll go to Europe because the educational system was really based on the European system. So therefore, you will want to go to Europe. But for me, I was just really fascinated by the movies, the John Waynes and the old movies that we saw, that I wanted to be a part of that program and be a part of the experience in the United States. Now, coming here, obviously, I was very determined to be successful just because I want to try to impress my father that the decision they made ultimately came around, by the way, to allow my mom to send me down here. But it was very important for me to impress him more than anything else. And I wanted to do so well. And I wanted him to be very proud of me so that he can allow my younger brothers and sisters to have an opportunity to come to the United States. And a whole lot of them did. So coming to America was an incredible experience. But what I find out, and as I've often said, is that there is no place on earth where you can get the kind of experience, the opportunity, the exposure to be able to make an impact, to be able to empower, and to be able to be given the opportunity to actually create and carve out a niche for yourselves. So there goes the story, and that is where we are, and now we are here today.
So you came here in 1973, I believe and to enroll in college.
Yes.
And were the first person to come here. What made you select Houston or the city and this area in terms of where to go to school and what you ultimately decided to major in? What gave you that sense that this is where you needed to be?
Well, actually, I didn't come to Houston straight from Nigeria. I went to Atlanta, and I actually went to Fort Valley in Georgia.
Right.
And did that program with Atlanta and Georgia Tech in terms of the chemical engineering program. And it was because of some friends that had gone before me that were studying in Georgia. And they were very instrumental in assisting me in terms of my admission applications and the various colleges that I needed to apply to. So while I was in Georgia, I also noticed the incredible number of Africans in Texas, especially in Houston.
Right.
So I was gravitated towards that, and I wanted to be a part of that experience. I think that in large part has to do with me coming down to Houston, Texas, and to enroll in to finish my education at Texas Southern University.
Right. Absolutely.
Go Tigers.
Let's fast forward some. You finished college and then went to work for someone else for a period of time, but ultimately founded KMAC in 1986. So what was the impetus for you from the standpoint of going into business for yourself? When did you decide that was being an entrepreneur was what I needed to do, and ultimately opening up the business in 1986?
Believe it or not, it wasn't something that I'd mapped out. But I remember growing up, my mother being a merchant in textile, always tell me that you do not like too much to be part of the house cleaning and cleaning your room or what have you. So I think maybe someday, you're going to be a trader or a business person. So that always stuck into me. So I was really working for Shell And while working for Shell, I was working at the refinery in Deer Park at the Shell Petroleum Refinery Complex as a young process engineer. And I soon found out that I was on the graveyard shift. I was always being put on that 10 to 6 shift. For a young man, weekends became very difficult for me because I wanted to have that social interaction just like any other young person. And true story. So I decided that I needed to get my MBA, which Shell was very instrumental in paying for it while working for Shell. And that's a really good program at Shell at that time. So while I was going through my MBA, I determined that I cannot be working with this hard hat on and going to work at the time when other people were going for social outing. I needed to do something that could be Monday to Friday so I can have my weekends off. So there goes the story, and I determined right there, right then, that what I needed to do is to see how I can utilize my origin, where I was born, to my new home, where I am and where I had grown up. And thus the bridge between America and Africa. And that is how really the story started.
KMAC stands for Cameroon American Company. Tell us about how you came up with that name. And then also, it was founded as an agricultural commodities trading company, right? So the fact that he's in oil and all these other things now is different than when you originally launched the company. So talk to us a little bit about how'd you come up with the name KMAC? And then 2, founding it as an agricultural commodities trading company, how did that all come about? And why did you focus on that at that time?
This is a matter of public records now because I think it's been well written about. But suffice it to say that I went home on vacation one Christmas period, and on the plane, which at that time was called Pan Am Airlines, Pan American Airlines, and it's like a shuttle, like a bus. It stops in so many countries before it gets to the eastern shore of the United States, in New York. So on our way back, we stopped in one of the French-speaking African country, and I'd actually slept coming in from Lagos for a fuel stop and to actually pick up more passengers and go to the next country. So I sat next to this individual who had come in from Cameroon, from Douala. His name is James Onobiono, a professor of mathematics out of Yaoundé University. This guy was fast asleep when I got to my seat, so I didn't bother to wake him up. Very tall guy, and he was occupying part of my space. But of course, I didn't bother until we get to the next destination, and he woke up, he saw me, and he said bonsoir. Of course, I didn't know what he said, which is hello, bonjour. So, but I quickly noted that he wasn't speaking English. I underestimated it. So I tried to speak the little I know, comment allez-vous? So we started talking, and I found out that while he was teaching mathematics, he was establishing this tobacco company with the Rimsman family out of Hamburg, Germany, to make cigarettes, including Marlboro, which was part of Philip Morris.
Right.
So I thought there was an opportunity somehow to talk to him, and he was telling me about some of the challenges that he had. But long and behold, I found out that some of the tobaccos that we were actually using in making the cigarettes was coming from the United States. I didn't know anything about tobacco. But I figure it's an opportunity to continue the conversation. So in those days, there was no cell phone or anything, so it was landline. He gave me his landline and his telex, the telex numbers, which for some of you, you probably remember telex. So I think we wrote each other a letter 1 or 2 times, but all of a sudden, he said he was coming to US. Can I meet him in New York? Well, that's the good news. The bad news is I didn't have money to go to New York. I didn't have money to buy tickets or stay in New York. So I told him, I said, guess what? It really would be nice for you to come down to Houston, just know some other parts of US. So he came, and he had this order with a letter of credit from his local bank to purchase tobacco. Anyone that had been to perhaps the 20th anniversary some 11, 12 years ago, I told this story. They needed to buy tobacco, go through Hamburg, and take it to Douala, Cameroon, where the factory was to make the cigarettes. So I said, I know everything about tobacco. Of course, I didn't. And I said, I know the right bank that is going to be able to do it. So there was a bank here in Houston called Texas Commerce Bank. That was the bank that I was using. So when I get paid, I deposit my check in the bank. So I took this letter of credit, went to that bank, and I told them, listen, I've got this instrument, we're going to buy some tobacco, we take it to Africa, and, I thought I could take it to the teller. The teller said, no, we don't do that. There are some people that does trade finance. They're on third floor. You can go talk to them. Of course, they say I have to make an appointment. Long and story short, I went back to the community to a man that was a great part of this civil rights movement in this community. And he introduced me to the chairman, because he was the doyen of our community. He introduced me to the chairman of Texas Commerce Bank and the president at that time, and that was Ben Love and Mark Shapiro. And he introduced me. He said, this is a young man. He usually come and assist us at the YMCA. And he said, he has something from Africa. I don't know too much about it, but maybe you all can help him out. And indeed, they tried. And they actually introduced me to some of the young bankers to take care of it. They were supposed to be part of international, but they knew nothing about Africa. All they knew was to go to Mexico or Brazil, because it's very close to US. Right. But they've never been to Africa. In fact, some of them have never gone to Europe. So they really don't know this bank, and they couldn't do anything. But let me just cut it short. At the end of the day, they turned it down. They couldn't. So I went back to him and I said, I've got a bank that can do this thing for you. Of course, they already turned me down. but we started looking at Export-Import Bank of the United States. And that is how we were able to do the first deal, buying tobacco from Louisville, Kentucky, Richmond, Virginia, and Springfield, Tennessee, and sending it to Africa. That was the beginning of Cameroon American Corporation, which is CAMAC today.
Great story, great story. You evolved out of selling tobacco, obviously. And I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but you evolved out of the agricultural thing into oil. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Nigeria, as a country, has one of the most mineral-rich countries in the world in terms of natural resources and the things that they have. So it would seem a natural evolution, and Texas, Houston in particular, is a oil town. But it's not that simple. You just can't say, I'm just going to go into you are entering into a field that is dominated, or is very few of us that look like us are in that field. So tell us a little bit about how you evolved CAMAC from what it was into the company that ultimately became the largest African-American owned company in a fairly short period of time, I would say, from '86, when you were walking around and with a letter of credit in the bank, and 16 years later you are the largest black-owned company in the country. Tell us about that and how you were able to sort of navigate that and use relationships that you had to turn KMAC into the company it became.
Well, at every step of the way of this journey, we must always remember that our biggest strength and our biggest support comes from family. Family that we put together all their savings just to make sure that you survive or you are able to follow the dream. And for me, it started with family. It started with my wife encouraging me, knowing full well that once I put my mind to doing something, we'll be able to do it. And I really like to recognize Eileen Lawal. She's here. She's been the pillar of what we do. So for us, we knew that if we continue to go to the oil fields in West Texas to buy acreages, to buy production, it would be a daunting task. But we never knew it was going to be almost impossible to win any of those opportunities. So whenever there is an asset or a production that is on sale, we bid for it, we go look at it, we bring some accountants with us, we use the resources that we don't have, and we always end up on the short end of the stick. So we decided, why continue to waste our time? Let us go back to the roots. Let's go back to the source. Let's go back to our origins, where we are blessed and lucky to have a country or come from a country that has the natural resources like you've mentioned. So we went back to Africa. And what we did wasn't going to Africa and telling them what to do or how to do things, but to see how we can partner up with them and see how they can assist us so that we can be able to get into the petroleum industry and be able to now bring it back to the U.S. And as I mentioned to you a little while ago, our getting involved in the oil business was really by accident. It was the government deciding that they would like to get their indigenous folks involved in the oil sector because, after all, that was the largest and most significant natural resources that they have. And in so doing, they see me as a bridge. I haven't lived in the energy capital in the world, which is Houston, and at the same time, having this connectivity with Africa and having originated from Africa, they thought I could be that bridge that can actually be able to source and try to find a partner in large oil companies that can actually train, develop skills, transfer technology, and provide capital to local indigenous African petroleum companies to be able to be an independent oil company. And that is essentially what we try to do, and that is what we did. So for us, over 26 years ago, Conoco believed in the story, and I won't bore you with how many that turned us down. We had almost 30 that turned us down. And we are almost giving up. And at that time, the government gave us the opportunity, and we were able to partner up with Conoco. And that investment by itself, in terms of exploration, we were lucky that it yielded fruit, because in exploration, for every 10 wells that you drill, with the best of technology, you'll be very, very lucky to have 2 or 3 wells come in with the gusher. And in our case, I believe after the 3rd well, it was productive, and we found oil together with Conoco. And that was how the story started.
So, great story. Conoco was the first partner.
Conoco, 1991, April 1.
So I want to, another date.
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day. I want to read a quote that you said, and it's apropos in regards to partnership, in regards to scale, which you and I talked about and we're going to come back to in a second. But in each of the things, in each of your growth sectors through KMAC, you've been able to successfully form partnerships. And so I want to read a quote from Kase. Life and the world in which we live in are based upon partnership. At KMAC, we believe that when you spend time developing relationships and understanding the culture where you want to do business, the results are mutually beneficial for all partners involved. You are the epitome. KMAC has been the epitome of forming partnerships both in Nigeria, partnerships in the US, partnerships with black-owned companies, and partnerships with non-black-owned companies. So speak to us about, A, the importance of partnerships, why you said your quote, if you will, and then how you went about trying to select partners, and also how you went about deciding who not to partner with. Because sometimes who you don't partner with is as important as who you decide to partner with.
Sure. So for us, we believe very strongly in the power of partnership. You know, the very life we live in is a life of partnership. Those that tolerate and accept us to be their life partners are our partners. Those we went to school with, from kindergarten, if you're lucky enough, through the high school, they are partners. Those we meet in our religious places of worship are partners. In fact, the world we live in is a world of partnership. I have found this to be the biggest tool in this journey so far. Every person that I meet is a potential partner until they prove otherwise. And don't forget that your network is your net worth. You've got to continue to give every single human being an opportunity. Hopefully they give you one. But they don't lose sleep on it. You can only control those that you have the ability to. So for us, when we try to do business, we look at it from a partnership strategy. We look at the space, and we look at the value proposition. And we look at what value you bring to the table. Because it has to be a win-win opportunity for each and every one of us. It can't be winner takes all. You can't. You can't do it alone. In the drill bit, in the exploration business where we are, including ExxonMobil, the largest oil company on earth, they do not drill the wells we drill in deep offshore with all their pro wells and technology and capital alone. Hardly could you see in ExxonMobil's portfolio drilling one well 100%. Hardly. They always have a partner, and most of those partners, being the largest, are smaller than they are. So when Exxon will partner up to drill a $100 million borehole, who are you that doesn't have the capital not to have partners? So let's take it down to the everyday business we do. Whether you have a restaurant, or whether you're in the hospitality business, or in the transportation business, or you're in the medical profession, or you're an engineer, try to identify those individuals or organizations that could be your partners. Because at the end of the day, they help you carry the load. You do not have to carry the load alone. They do bring something to the table. They do contribute. They are value added. Every single human being or institution for me is a value add. Until I cannot find the value that they bring to the table, I don't waste my time on that. I move to the next one. Because it's very important for you not to dwell on just talking, but you've got to have a plan of action. You have to have a business plan. And you've got to be able to actually marry what you have, the skills you possess, with the skills that your potential partners is going to bring to the table. For us, with Conoco, we brought the assets to the table. They brought the technology and the capital to the table. That was a partnership. And that was the bedrock of our organization. That is how we are who we are today. So, whether it's our spouses, whether it's our life partners, partnership is very important. We have to learn to listen to each other, to communicate with each other, to be able to share with each other, and to be able to tolerate each other.
Right.
Because there is no perfect partnership. For us, we will do no business without having a partner that we feel we can do business with. So we believe very strongly in that.
Let me touch on a subject that we addressed, or I brought up on Wednesday night. We had a fireside chat with the mayor, Sylvester Turner of Houston, and Clyde Drexler. And one of the audience members asked about how they secure a contract with the city of Houston. And they were attempting to answer the question, and I said, well, before we get to the point of answering the question, I said, let me address for the audience what I find to be the biggest challenge. I said, Black Enterprise has been in business for 47 years. And we have chronicled and been witness to the growth and development of African-American businesses since 1970 to where it is now. But frankly, over the last 20 years, it has plateaued. There's a few that have risen up to the billion-dollar size, but for the most part, it has plateaued. And for the longest time, people said the challenge for African-American owned businesses was access to capital. We got great ideas, but we have a lack of access to capital. And what I have been championing over the past 5 to 10 years is that access to capital is not the greatest obstacle for African-American owned businesses. Black owned businesses, I guess you would agree. The biggest obstacle for black owned businesses in this country, if not the world, but let's talk about the US for the time being, is scale. Scale, scale, scale. We spend a lot of time talking to our respective clients, sponsors of our events and others, corporate America, who have large procurement programs. And they say, I want to do business with black-owned businesses. And I believe in their heart, actually they do. The problem is that 96% of black-owned businesses in this country are sole proprietorships. 96%. That means we employ nothing but ourselves. You hang a shingle out, you talk about what you do, but you employ absolutely nobody. And so what happens is that we're bidding on contracts that you have no chance in the world of ever landing. Because if your company is doing $500,000 in sales, but the contract is for $15 or $20 million, which, by the way, would be a minute contract for a large company. Right? If Walmart has a contract that they want to put out for bid, it may be $50 million or $25 million, which would be a very small contract. You cannot do $500,000 in sales and ultimately win a contract that's 15 to 20 million. You don't have the scale. So what has stood in the way? What stood in the way, frankly, is in many cases self-inflicted. And that is our unwillingness to work together, our unwillingness to merge, our unwillingness to bury our egos. And in some cases, we have a lot of black-owned businesses would rather own 100% of a $500,000 company than 30% of a $100 million company, just so they could hand out a business card that says, Chairman, President, CEO of this cup of coffee or this glass of water. You can't deposit business cards at the bank. Cannot. You can hand them out at the nightclub, but you can't deposit them at the bank. Not impressive whatsoever. No one cares what your title says on your car because your business is not doing anything from that perspective. And I go back to the partnerships thing that you brought up to say, if ExxonMobil can merge, if American Airlines and US Air can merge, why can't Pookie and Ray Ray merge? And the reason we can't is generally, again, self-inflicted because we want to be the one, quote, who's in charge. Now, I give that all that preamble as a setup to you, if you will, for one of the things that you have, that Kase has taken on is he's in the banking business as well. Unity Bank, here based in Houston. One of the largest black-owned banks in the country, one of the few left black-owned banks in the country. But we have spent a great deal of time, you and I, debating and talking about this over and over again. Our black-owned banks individually are at best sufficient, at best. When I say sufficient, meaning that they can survive locally, what have you, but more and more of our black-owned banks have gone out of business. Simply don't have the capital. You have to have, based on the banking regulations, you have to have a certain amount of capital so that you can lend a certain amount of capital out. Been unable to bring these banks together. To this day, there is not a national black-owned bank in this country that can actually do business in 50 states, much less 10 states probably. You became the owner of Unity National Bank, or you guys took over Unity National Bank some time ago. Talk to us a little bit about your decision to go into banking, how that came about through one of your mentors, Lee Brown. And then more importantly, talk to us about this need for us to get to scale and why that is so important and how it impacts the banking business as a whole.
Well, Butch, as you and I have discussed, and I'd like to share it with our audience here, we didn't go out of our way to be bankers. In fact, we're still reluctant bankers because we are not. And we feel that there are professional bankers out there that need to manage the banks. We just need to be shareholders and get superior returns on our investments. But if you are called by the CEO of the city, the mayor, and the mayor tells you that I want to help all the people of Houston, and most especially the minority community, especially the African American community. But I do have one big obstacle, and that is the ability for those that are qualified to do business with the city to obtain or have access to obtaining performance bonds that will be necessary under the city ordinance to be able to be awarded those contracts. And the same mayor told you that there's only one bank here in the state of Texas that perhaps can help those prospective contractors to participate in the contracting opportunities and procurement opportunities. So I want you to go and talk to the owners of those banks and get involved with them, and you'll try to grow the bank so they can be in the position to provide the performance bond. That was my case. That is how I got involved in the banking. The mayor was the first black mayor of the city of Houston, Mayor Lee P. Brown, a great man and a great leader. And I told the mayor, I said, you know, Mayor, you and the city council just elected me to my first term on the largest seaport in the United States, the Port of Houston, as the 41st commissioner. I'm not a banker, and I don't know anything about banking except to borrow money from banks. And so I don't know whether I can help you in that. But he told me calmly, I want you to go out there and meet the owners of the bank and see whether they will sell you a part of the bank. What do you tell the mayor? I said, yes, sir. I left his office. 2 days later, they set up the appointments. I met with the owners of the bank, 2 churches, and 1 individual. And all 3 of them told me the bank wasn't for sale, but why don't you come and open an account in our bank and we get to know you, and maybe we start conversation. So that is how it started. And I went straight right back from that meeting to go and see the mayor downtown. And I said, Mayor, I did what you want me to do. They said, no, they are not selling. So can I go now? And he said, well, okay, fine. Very quiet man. He said, fine, that's okay. 6 months later, one of the churches couldn't make their obligation to a Phoenix, Arizona financial institution. The shares became available, and thus goes the story, how we were granted by the Feds and the Federal Reserve Institution and OCC to take control of the bank in December 2005. 12 years later, the bank was about $40 million at that time. Today, the bank is about $100 million in size. But, well, thank you. But I need to tell you that indication in the banking circuits, they will look at you and said, what are you doing wasting your time? The same banks that were set up about the same time that we took control of Unity Bank are currently about $3, $4, $5 billion today. So we set out together with the mayor, and of course, the mayor now was time limited. And of course, he was going into retirement. And guess what? Payback time. The board decided, no, you're not going to retirement. You have to be the chairman of what you set up, because you got us involved in this bank, so we want you to come in and be the chairman of this bank. So he was chairman of the bank for the last 12 years until he retired 2 months ago, when reluctantly they elected me to be the chairman of the bank. So I've been vice chairman for 12 years, supporting him. But we set out by going out throughout the country. At that time, there were 47 African-American controlled banks in the United States. Today, there are 20. Today, there are 20. And not because of consolidation, because we set out about 9 years ago, together with the mayor, I still call him mayor, together with Dr. Brown, as the chairman and the vice chairman, we set out to crisscross the country to talk to owners of African-American banks to see how we can consolidate to be able to have the scale that could be able to serve the communities in which we are hoping to empower. Because for the size of each one of our banks, collectively, was less than $5 billion. And $5 billion size in the banking circuit is considered a small bank. There are almost 5,960 banks in the United States. There are 103 banks in the city of Houston. There are about 390 banks in the state of Texas. And your bank is $100 million. It's nothing to clap for. No, there's no pride in it. It shouldn't be. But of almost 15 banks we talked to, from Maryland to Washington to Atlanta to the Carolinas to Louisiana to Birmingham, Alabama, none of them was willing to be in partnership with us. I thought it would be very easy, just like in the oil and gas, when we had partners in BP, in Conoco, in Texaco, in Statoil, that it would be very easy. We all after the same goals and objective of empowering the community in which we all come from. It should be so easy for all of us to get together. We go to church together, we worship together, but it wasn't to be. And a lot of these banks went down, especially during the financial crisis. A lot of them actually got support, TARP, if you remember TARP. They got support from federal government, from Treasury, to be able to stay open. But lo and behold, they never made it. And that is the reason why we are 20 banks today. It shouldn't be like that. In 1980s, there were 110 African-American banks. Today, there are 20 banks. So what I'm saying, Butch, is that we are too small. We are too fragmented. We've got to be able to listen to what you all are saying, that we should have a bank in every state, every city in the United States where African-American people live and work. We should be able to create institutions where when folks are coming out of universities, they want to work in banking, they can be recruited out of their graduating classes and work for these banks. But unless we have a bank that is a minimum $1 to $2 billion, we can't do this, and we can't help emerging African-American and minority individuals that are growing their businesses to be able to do business with us. So I believe very strongly in consolidation. I believe very strongly in scales. You have been preaching that, and I would like for you to continue to preach that nationally, because we've got to have a national bank that can serve the people of this nation, and most especially the African-American businesses, individuals, and people.
Momentarily, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I don't know if there's I guess there'll be someone walking around with a mic to do Q&A. The two ladies over there. So I'm going to open it in a moment to Q&A, and I'm going to make sure, again, questions, not quanswers, that I'd like you guys to ask to our guest, Kase. But last thing before, my last question to you, before I open it up to the greater audience. One of the things that you and I have talked about and you have been a real proponent of is the need for there to be American, or let's call it African American, and African partnership in doing business in Africa, U.S. companies doing business in Africa, African American companies doing business in Africa, and so forth and so on, going back and forth. Especially in the area of technology, fintech, financial technology, and other collaborations. Speak a little bit too, because you are in a unique position in that you are, if you will, a member of both societies. You're a member of, you're a citizen of both. You are lived in and were born in Africa, in Nigeria, but also have spent the majority of your adult life here in the U.S. So you're uniquely qualified to speak about that opportunity. Speak to the audience about what you see as the opportunity between this U.S. African American businesses doing business in Africa and African businesses doing business in the United States, and what that collaboration can mean. Because more oftentimes than not, our people here in the United States, are either afraid, I won't use the word ignorant, but I'll say underexposed, afraid, underexposed, or concerned about doing business in Africa. And perhaps there's probably mistrust also on the other side from African countries or African folks wanting to do business with African American folks. So speak a little bit, if you would, about that and why you see that as such a big opportunity.
This is a very good question, and it's something I wish we had more time, but obviously we have to continue this conversation because it's very, very important. We just all need to look back at the platform that continues to be the magnet to attract and actually get the African Americans and people of African origin together. In times past, It had been cultural, arts, entertainment, performance, musicians, either coming from Africa, Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, and all these great artists that made it in America. And the same thing going over there. And of course, during the civil rights, we had a whole lot of folks that were involved in this, either migration to Africa or connecting with Africa. The case of Liberia, everybody knows. The case of so many countries, Malcolm X and a whole lot of people that came to share the New World experiences with us in Africa. Today, it's about technology. And that is a platform, that space. We've got to use it to be able to reconnect between African Americans and Africa. Suffice it to say that when we decided to go to Africa, yes, we may have had an advantage because we were born there, but please don't forget that I came to this country before I was 20, and I've been here for over 40 years. So therefore, there is no reason whatsoever why we cannot use the tremendous advantages and opportunities and exposures and access that we have here in the United States and be able to connect with businesses in Africa on that technological platform. And we may well be the wholesaler or the connector or the representative of those apps, of those information technology that the manufacturers, the developers are here in the United States. Amazon, Google, name it. They are all over Africa, but they are based here. PayPal. How many of you know where mobile banking started in the world? How many of you know that? It started in Kenya with the global telecoms company called Vodafone, who used to be the majority owner of Verizon. Their subsidiary called Safaricom actually developed M-Pesa. M-Pesa led to all kinds of pay on delivery, PayPal, name it, all over the world. There are billions and billions of dollars today. Can you imagine African Americans taking advantage of that, going to Kenya and partnering up with those companies over there and being a part of PayPal today? They will be billionaires today. So there are so many different platforms that we can use to be able to connect. Unfortunately, we don't have sufficient time to be able to deal with that today, but this conversation ought to continue. We ought to have an avenue or a workshop where we can get together and be able to continue to share this information. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to open this up to a few Q&A. State your name and the question, please.
Yes, good morning, rather. My name is Smith Tahiti. I'm currently starting a truck stop in Lawton, Oklahoma. If you were in my shoes, what would you do different to make it a success immediately? And second of all, can I partner with you?
Did you say trust company?
Truck.
Oh, truck stop. 18-wheelers.
He is starting
with a
truck.
gas station and convenience store. That's along the same line of business.
Okay. Well, I don't know too much about transportation business, but there is a general application to businesses. We've talked about partnership today. And to the extent that you are starting out with a fleet of, say, 5 or 10 fleets, there are companies out there that have fleets in thousands. I think one of the first things that you want to have with you is the best practices. Is to have those that understand logistics and understand where those cargoes will be coming in from, just from my experience from the port or the airport system. And you need to be able to identify those because they are right in Oklahoma. They are all over the country. They are all over the cities. that you can approach and say, you know, I've just started this. This is what I have, which is good enough because you are coming to the table with value. You are a value add. You are not coming in with cap in hand begging for anybody to do anything for you. You already have your trucks. So, but you want to let them know that I want to be the best in this, and I know you've done a good job. I've done my research. I want to learn from you so that we can be the best we can and partner where you have the routes, the cargoes. I can be your partner. There's no shame in being a junior partner to start with. There's no shame in being an apprentice. Because at the end of the day, you will be the best that you want to be. Those are some of the general principles and advice and guidance that I'd like to give you.
Well said. Next question.
Mr. Lawal, good morning, sir. My name is Uchenaya Ogba, and first of all, thank you so much for being here. I think it's a pleasure to listen and hear your story. I think as a Nigerian also, it's a very similar story that I've been through. My question is, what partnerships can we as Africans or African Americans participate in Nigeria or Africa at large? Can you identify any current opportunities that we can be a part of? Thank you.
Well, one thing that Africa is very blessed with is their enrichment and endowed natural resources. That is a given, because there is no reason for African countries to continue to grow and export cocoa and coffee beans without making the chocolates, which is made in Switzerland or in some of the French countries, and be brought back to Africa. Agriculture is very important in Africa. So is natural resources, including metals, hydrocarbons, and mining. So I would say if you are going into the conventional business, those would be areas that obviously you want to look at and look at partnership. You know, the incredible thing about the United States is almost everything that is on this earth that you are looking for is here. It's right in our backyard. It's right here in Houston, Texas, if you're in the oil business or energy business. So partner up with those companies that know what they are doing, but they have no link, no relationship in Africa. Be their representative, be their partner, and be their shareholder over there. You've created value already. I think you've got to look at your space. You've got to carve out a niche for yourself. You've got to know what you want to do and prepare yourself, because if you are not prepared, there's no way you can take advantage of the opportunities. Even if they stare you right in the face, you won't know it. So that would be my advice to you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is J.D. Garnier. First of all, I want to thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. I think everybody's getting a lot out of it. My first question is on a personal note, for someone who's accomplished so much, what is it left that you aspire to do that you haven't done yet, or business areas that you have not gotten into yet? And then secondly, you talked a lot about Africa and Nigeria. How do we here in America change the perception of how bountiful, how much opportunity there is there? I think that there's a perception that people look to Europe and other areas in the world and not Africa. How do we change that perception here in the United States?
Well, one thing you do have that we didn't have when we started business is social media. Is the communication link. You have that. We didn't have it. I was just telling you about telex and landlines calling each other when they go through. In terms of perception, you've got to use all the tools at your disposal to not only prove yourself, convince those that may have a negative perception about you, or where you come from, or what the conventional media wrote about you. But there are a lot of great things coming out of Africa. Mark Zuckerberg was just in Africa, I think in Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria recently. And he was seen jogging on one of the bridges, which I won't dare go myself when I'm in Africa. I won't go there because I would have thought, it's dangerous for me to do it. And I saw him on YouTube running on this same bridge that I know about. I mean, what great opportunity for you to be able to rejuvenate, to actually create the narration about yourself and the perception that you believe people had that is negative about you, to say, see Mark, see what he's doing. And then he was recruiting tens of thousands of apps, individuals creating these apps, creating this technology from Africa, bringing them here to the United States. I mean, what a great platform for you to be able to showcase that Africa is not bad after all, in spite of conventional wisdom, in spite of media, negativity. So you've got a whole slew of opportunities to be able to do that. And in terms of the businesses, you know what? With the tools that is at your disposal, you guys are way ahead of us than what will have ever been, really. You really are. And for me, I'm at a point where I want to continue to learn from you, the young generation. I want to learn from you. I want to spend more time with you because you have so much to offer and so much to teach us. I mean, how many times in the last 20 years, when you buy a new TV or you buy a new flat screen or 4D or whatever they call it, you take it home, you're 10-year-old or whatever, without reading the instruction manual or whatever, you go up to go and change, you come down, it's already working. How many of you goes through that, even today? You got a new laptop or iPad or whatever, and your 5-year-old is showing you how to use it. It's so incredible, guys. And this is what we've got to take advantage of. Because the world is yours. Today is yours. This is your platform. This is your stage. You cannot miss this opportunity. You can't miss these times. I encourage you. I want to learn from you. And that's the kind of business that I want to learn to do as we continue on this journey of life.
Last question.
My name is Joyce Scott, and I run Superb Speakers. You introduced me to Richard Hebner, and as a result, I came from Austin, now live in Houston. I've had contracts with NASA. I've had contracts with Centerpoint, the federal government. I'm consistently called to do business with the Army. I have 130 consultants in my business that I have a strategic alliance with. Thank you. And what I did is listened. I would like to ask you, because I am asked to do some work in Africa, and we're going to do it, to train some of the professionals there in the kinds of things that my experts, who are best-selling authors on the New York Times list, not some other cute thing, we're asked to go to Africa for the oil companies to train professionalism for the staffs. I know there are other opportunities. Could you speak to the fact that we have a downturn in Houston, that people should continue to grow and go? Because that's what I've done using your advice. And I'd like to keep people enabled and empowered.
Thank you very much. What I like to do, and I think my boss in the office is here, is to actually get as much information as I can get today, because what I'd like to share with you is a video of the great leader of our time, Martin Luther King, in 1965, a speech he gave. And that speech says, "Let us keep moving. Don't stop. Keep moving." Because when you stop, that's it. I really like to share that with you. I've shared it with my children recently. Somebody sent it to me. And it was just so appropriate in the times we live in the challenges and the opportunities that we do have. When I hear stories like this, the other day, someone was telling me about the same thing about Houston Minority Development Corporation, Richard Hubner and some of these people, that we created when we were at the Port of Houston, which I was there for 7 terms, about 15 years. And we increased the procurement of hundreds of millions of dollars to 35% of small businesses, mostly minorities and African Americans. And they were telling me their stories. And I usually don't get too emotional, but I think I did. Because that is really what it's all about. It's a window. When you prepare yourself, when you have the education, when you have the training, the opportunities you must take advantage of, but people will also open the doors for you. So we must keep moving. We must never stop. We must keep moving. No matter what the obstacles, no matter the challenges, we must keep moving. And I'd like to share that video with you all. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kase Lawal. Let's give him another round of applause. Okay, thank you very much.